what the Russian Federation is doing is in violation of international law, using force to change borders, sham referenda, illegal annexation, murder of innocent civilians, targeting civilian areas with very expensive precision munitions. These are not accidents. And then, of course, causing disruption and life-threatening circumstances for millions of people because of blocking the shipment of grain and energy. So all of these things are part of the Russian way of war, not to mention undermining democracies around the world through malign influence and money and other means. So that's what this is about. Nobody's saying that Ukraine is perfect or that Europe is perfect or that the United States is perfect. But in terms of the moral circumstances of this conflict, which I think has been going on for about 30 years, actually, starting with this breakaway of Transnistria, then invasion of Georgia, then invasion of Crimea, support for Assad, and now what started in February. It's the new 30 years war. While he has made several fatal strategic mistakes that are going to lead to the collapse of, I believe, the Russian Federation here in the coming years, and certainly their defeat on the battlefield, he was smart enough to recognize years ago that the West would be very, very slow to act decisively to what he was doing. I think they calculated that the West would not stick together, that we would not really support Ukraine, which is, I think, part of why he went ahead back in February, could get away with what he had been doing in previous years. Because this argument somehow that this is really the fault of the West, and that we lied to after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and that NATO is encircling Russia, is a total farce. And it's, any serious person can see that. I mean, the question is, why do all the nations that used to be Soviet republics or under the Warsaw Pact, why did they go scrambling to join NATO and the EU as fast as they could? Because they know what it's like to be a part of the Russian Empire, whatever the name is. It's about being a part of the Russian Empire. None of them wanted that. So NATO offered that. The idea that somehow NATO is expanding is a completely wrong way to describe it. And the safest part of Russia was always the part that touched NATO. That was the one place where they could be sure from which they would never be invaded. They're never going to invade Russia. And now, because of what President Putin has initiated, the amount of NATO that touches his border is doubling once Finland becomes a member of the alliance, and I think in a few years, Ukraine. I think the Ukrainians have achieved irreversible momentum. Of course, it's too early to be planning victory parades, and this is going to go on for some time. But my sense is that so long as we, the US, the UK, and other allies and partners who have been supporting Ukraine, as long as we stick together, keep sanctions in place, continue to deliver what we said we're going to deliver, then I think Ukrainian forces are going to push the Russians back to the 23 February line. My only criticism of the Biden administration, which I believe has done a superb job consulting with allies, helping to keep things moving, and despite all of our own domestic challenges in the U.S., the Congress has continued to support large numbers of aid in terms of dollar amounts and quality. But the criticism is that they have self-deterred a little bit, because they have been concerned that if we provide a certain thing, that will do it, and that the Russians would somehow escalate. And I think this is an exaggerated thing. And in fact, the sooner we can deliver things like ATACMS, which is a 300-kilometer range rocket that could be fired from HIMARS, the sooner we start getting Abrams tanks or German Leopards or those kind of capabilities there, so that they can train and integrate that, that will accelerate the end of this war. But I feel confident in making my assessment, because we know from history that war is a test of will and it's a test of logistics. And the Russian logistical system is exhausted, and it's going to get worse as Ukrainians continue to pound like they're doing now, ammunition storage sites, headquarters, as they continue to capture critical rail junctions like Lyman, which they apparently are doing as we speak. And then when you add however many number of newly mobilized troops show up, that's added burden on the logistical system, which is already exhausted. So I think for that reason alone, and because of sanctions prevent the Russians from replacing all of their precision weapons, they're under enormous stress. But how does that get to Crimea? I think this counteroffensive that started back at the beginning of the month, we focused on Kherson, then we focused on the part that came down through Kharkiv and now has resulted in the capture apparently of Lyman. This is all one thing. It's one counteroffensive with different components. And the Ukrainian General Staff has impressed me with, first of all, their knowledge and skill of employing operational art, but also they seem to be agile enough to exploit opportunities as weaknesses are discovered and so on. And once that happens, then I think it's a matter of time that Crimea becomes untenable for Russian forces. The image of those people at the beach, like, what the heck is going on, revealed either total arrogance or total don't care or total not my problem. And the next day, instead of rushing to the recruiter's office, there was a massive traffic jam on that bridge for them trying to get out of there. So that was revealing, and it also pulled away the curtain of invulnerability, that they couldn't be hurt. Since then, the Russians, they have relocated the submarines of the Black Sea Fleet away from Sevastopol to their naval base, which is further to the east on the Russian mainland. So I think this was important psychologically, and it revealed to me a lack of will. The Ukrainians are literally defending their homeland. The vast majority of Russian soldiers who have been deployed into Ukraine are from ethnic regions well outside of Moscow. This is a traditional method of the old Russian Empire, is to use all of your colonials to do to bear the brunt of the fighting, and most of the casualties don't come from Moscow or St. Petersburg, which is a way to shield the elites from having to deal with the reality of what's going on. Now, I think that the will of the Ukrainian people, I was not surprised the Ukrainian soldiers would do well. We were working with them starting in 2015 as were UK and Canada, to help train Ukrainian soldiers. And I remember my sergeant saying, wow, these guys are really, really good. What I did not anticipate was how the Ukrainian people would respond and would come together. There was a wonderful thing on Twitter the other day. It said, on 24 February, Ukrainians were Googling how to make Molotov cocktail. On 21 September, Russians were Googling for flights. The Ukrainians, of course, especially the senior officers, were trained in the old Soviet system. They know everybody. This is why part of the reason for the success of sinking the Moskva, the Black Sea Fleet's flagship, is because the Ukrainian Navy knew exactly, every square inch of that ship. Built his word, such as it had radar that could only operate in 180 degrees, not 360. So meaning that if they could distract the radar, which they did with the drones, there would be a blind spot. That comes from that sort of intimate knowledge. They also understand that Russia's logistics system is not designed for sustained land operations outside of Russia. So therefore, that they would depend heavily on railroads to move the enormous amounts of ammunition. And so the Ukrainians were able to figure out how do they target that because of this knowledge of the Russian practices. But I think as a result of Ukrainian soldiers serving alongside British and American soldiers and other allies for the past several years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then training with them, they have, and I don't want to overstate this, but they have evolved fairly rapidly into a more Western style command and control. Their authority is pressed down. Junior leaders are expected to make decisions, unlike the Soviet and now Russian system of a very centralized command and control. Given the circumstances and the mass that the Russians still possess, being able to seize these various rail hubs has been a very important part of the operational design. When you talk about Kupiansk or Izium and now Liman, once you seize those, then the Russian forces really do have no choice but their only choices are to stay and fight until they run out of everything and then get killed or captured, withdraw. The Ukrainians understand the importance of these rail hubs necessary for resupply. Moving ammunition, and the Russian army is an artillery army. It's not a tank army, it's an artillery army. Moving thousands of tons of heavy, high explosive artillery ammunition, that is no mean feat. I mean, it's hard to do. So the more you can destroy the rail connections or deny those to the Russians, the more the burden it puts on their truck fleet, which has been severely attrited, as you would imagine, and any truck can carry artillery ammunition. So again, the Ukrainians, I think, have been very smart and methodical in eliminating or degrading Russian artillery by going after the supply system. Long-range precision fires, which, by the way, is the #1 modernization priority for the United States Army, starting several years ago when General Milley, our current chairman of the Joint Chiefs, when he was chief of the Army, he made, so several years ago, long-range precision fires was the #1 modernization priority for the U.S. Army because of what you can achieve with at distance with a rocket that can hit, that's GPS guided, that can hit a target. So the Ukrainians, of course, I'd like to see us give them more of these launchers, but nonetheless, they have made very skillful use of the capability that comes with HIMARS or the MLRS and various other type systems. And I think that the Ukrainians deserve huge credit for how they have employed things. To be honest, I don't think there are any other soldiers in the world that are faster or better than they are at adapting to new technologies. I mean, they are very, very tech savvy. When we provided the Q-36 radar back in 2015, this is a counter-fire radar. It's basically a trailer that's pulled by Humvee, and it's ideal for detecting incoming artillery, mortars, and that sort of thing. So you get the early warning, but it also tells you point of origin. Where did it come from? So you can shoot back. And very quickly after we provided those radar, it was made clear to me that the radar is much better than I had realized. The Ukrainians made it better. The deception of Kherson, drawing the Russians down towards Kherson so the main attack could go up near Kharkiv, I think many of us are going to be studying this for quite some time, the operational design of this campaign, but also in the information space. They have done such a good job of capturing our imagination. And of course, a lot of this emanates directly from the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky. I think it was day 2 or 3, when he's walking around Kyiv with his cell phone, saying, "Hey, I'm still here." That is impressive. And of course, he's been very visible. He didn't leave, and he's been such an effective communicator. But I do remember thinking, how the hell is his phone still working? US or UK would have taken out that from the very beginning. That revealed one of Russia's vulnerabilities. They were counting on being able to use the Ukrainian cell service. For deception to work, it has to be believable. And so there was so much talk about Kherson. It was the only oblast capital that had been captured in the last 7 months. It was a critical place on the Dnieper River, important port, and so there was all kinds of reasons to point toward we've got to get it back, and not only that, but also to protect Odessa. you had to stop the Russians there. So it was so believable that that was going to be the main effort. And of course, I remember people being frustrated. I'm very good professional journalists as well as other professional observers of the conflict. People saying, "Where's the famous Harrison offensive? When's it going to start?" And I'm like, they're not going to tell you when it's going to start. I mean, but everybody or so many people bought into it. So how did they manage to keep the surprise, the deception in play? And I think part of this, of course, is containing the information. Who knows, classified information practices, but also the discipline, because now, I mean, everybody has a phone. And so there had to be some real discipline to make sure that soldiers were not texting pictures of themselves somewhere that would give away, hey, why is he there? Why is that unit there? The fact that they're moving through Ukrainian territory, so that they were able to, it didn't get out somehow what was going on. I'm impressed. The counteroffensive didn't start, in September. It started probably back in May, when they began to realize, or they became more confident that the Russians were going to culminate in a couple of months. But I think they knew as early as May that the Russian forces would culminate in August, because the logistics system was not going to succeed. The morale of Russian soldiers, the will to fight, all these things were already becoming clear, even as Ukrainians were losing hundreds of soldiers a day to Russian artillery. The Ukrainian General Staff was able to think, and this is part of the how higher staffs have to think. We're going to take a pounding now, but there's going to come a time when the Russian forces will culminate, what Clausewitz called the culminating point, where the attacking force runs out of impetus, runs out of resources, runs out of will for a variety of reasons. And of course, the reason Clausewitz talked about the culminating point is because you want to identify it, and if you can, accelerate your enemy towards this culmination, but then so you can plan your counterstroke. And so I think probably, I don't know this, but I would imagine probably as early as May, June, they were already beginning to think about how they would do this. And that would necessitate, of course, making sure that they didn't have leaks, the government or the general staff. So Belarus is a very interesting question. Lukashenko has thus far managed to sit on the fence, allow Russia to use it, airspace and bases and staging and all that, but none of the units of the Belarusian armed forces have gone into the fight. Now they are worse than the Russian forces are in terms of quality, and they have the equivalent, I believe. Of course, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe they have about 10 battle groups total. A huge country, not with a huge population. And I think that Lukashenko is wary about letting his units go in there and get ground up, because protecting his own regime is job one for him. And I think he knows that he would have a real problem on his hands if his forces were sent in there. He'd be worried about the survival of his own illegitimate regime. I don't know how much longer he can sustain that, or he realizes that he's just got to gut it out because Putin will be gone next year. Maybe he, maybe he sees that. I do think that we're looking at the beginning, though, of the collapse of the Russian Federation. I mean, it is conceivable to me that by next spring, just like at the end of the First World War, you're going to see thousands of defeated Russian soldiers dragging their stuff back home, and they're going to go home to a country that has an economy that has been shattered by the resources that's poured into this ill-conceived campaign, as well as sanctions. And I mean, even in Russia, where, yes, of course, there are millions that believe and support what Putin is saying, I think that we are beginning to see fissures, particularly in the other outer regions. Chechnya, obviously, I think they see opportunity. I think that the combination of all these factors, battlefield losses, sanctions, defeat, and corruption is going to lead to this breakup of the Russian Federation. Of course, there will always be a Russian state, but the Russian Federation, which is an artificial rump of the Soviet Union, of the empire, are we prepared? And are we prepared for what that entails? We were not prepared for the breakup of the Soviet Union, I don't think. This is very interesting, and understandably, Ukraine and many others are talking about war crimes trials and all this, and absolutely there is a need for that. But I think that and already people are collecting plenty of evidence, and there will be no shortage of evidence for these kinds of things. But we don't want to lose sight of what has to be done first, which is to win this conflict. We don't want to make it easy for some, frankly, European allies to have excuses of not focusing on helping Ukraine win. So keep the focus on actually accomplishing the end state that we want, and then the tribunals and all that will come. Justice will be meted out, I have no doubt. Of course, in The Hague, it will take time. The UN will block anything because, Russia and China will block anything coming out of the UN. So I'm not holding out hope there. But the international courts in The Hague and so on, I think those will take time. But it will happen. I think as someone from Human Rights First, we are very concerned about the 1 million plus Ukrainians who have been kidnapped and deported, scattered all over Russia, which is in the tradition of Stalin. That's what Ukrainians or Russia has done to Ukrainians now, and estimates of over 250, 300,000 kids, flown out of or taken out of Ukraine and distributed around Russia. I think that has to be one of the stated deliverables, is that Russia has to return these people. There's a realization also that even with the best, most modern equipment, such as what the Russian Air Force had, if you're not trained, if you don't know how to employ it, technologically advanced your equipment is, you have to have sergeants, you have to have people that are trained, you have to maintain these things, and you have to employ them correctly, and the Russians have not done that. So all these generals that were getting killed at the beginning of the conflict, it's because they were on a cell phone. And a teenager can geolocate where you are. You're yakking away on a cell phone, and then of course it's easier to target and you wipe out a headquarters. They continued to locate headquarters, and they knocked these out. And so in this vertical command and control system, when you start taking out headquarters, it's not just the guy that's making the decisions. It's the staff around him that are doing analysis, that are anticipating what needs to be, ordering up trucks to move this or, whatever. That's gone. And so now you've got junior leaders that are not accustomed to or willing to make decisions and make adjustments, because the guy above them is, the headquarters is a smoking heap. Future war is going to be that combination of who can rapidly assimilate new technologies the fastest, and who can be the most clever about basically crowdsourcing. Where the Ukrainian forces are operating, they're surrounded by thousands of sensors that know what's around. But you're still going to need to address the industrial base. The amount of ammunition that was consumed the last 7 months is so far more than we spent the last 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have a challenge in all of our countries. Can our defense industries produce the quantity as well as the quality? And so this is going to be a challenge. Air and missile defense. I now have had to recalculate what I think the requirement is, because the Russians clearly are targeting populations. And so the amount of missile defense systems that we have is barely enough to protect critical infrastructure. So you need a lot more to protect populated areas. And this is something that I'm rethinking. But of course, the Chinese are watching all this. And the Chinese, who I think are 5 years away from being ready to go after Taiwan. President Xi said that the other day, told his military, 2027, be ready for Taiwan. That's not an order to invade, but in terms of a target date. And that coincides with the end of what will be his third term, assuming he takes that third term here next month. So the conflict with China would be different in many ways from what's happening here. It obviously would not be such a land conflict, but the effectiveness of long-range missiles, the vulnerability of ships that don't have trained, disciplined crews, and clearly the Black Sea Fleet, which is cowering under the cliffs of Crimea, and Ukraine does not even have a navy. The importance of joint operations. I don't think there's been a day in the last 7 months where Russian Air Force, Land Force, and Navy operated together. They never got the joint. And so to get the benefit of all these capabilities, modern capabilities, it has to be in an integrated way. And then the last thing I'd say, Jonathan, is it still requires sergeants. It still requires soldiers who are disciplined and trained. There are many. I'm not a tanker, by the way, so I'm not defending tanks out of a personal love. But too many people were quick to say, "Oh, that's it, no more tanks," because look what happened. Yeah, every video I saw of a Russian tank getting destroyed, it was improperly camouflaged or not camouflaged. It was sitting out in the open. It was unprotected by dismounted infantry when it moved through. I mean, every mistake you could make has been on display, and they've paid the price with a destroyed tank on a TikTok video. So don't learn the wrong lessons about this. I don't know a single commander that would not want to have protected mobile firepower. All of this, it is a deadly, deadly battlefield. Well, of course, this was a significant victory by Ukrainian forces, but two or three things really strike me about this. Not humanitarian in nature at all, but clearly General Surovikin, the new operational commander of Russian forces, has been given authority to do some things that nobody else could do before. I mean, he would have recognized weeks ago that they needed to get out of Kherson and on the to the other side of the Dnipro River. And so a good operational decision for the Russian side, but humiliating for the Kremlin, which is why I think the announcement of the decision was played out on Russian TV. I mean, that's not the kind of thing that typically would be broadcast, but that was a little bit of theater to spare the president of the Russian Federation the humiliation of being directly associated with it. So there was an excellent map that came out on Twitter about 2 weeks ago that showed concentric rings around Kherson. If you imagine HIMARS being brought up to the river or somewhere thereabouts, which is what I imagine the Ukrainian armed forces will do, the current type of rocket, the GMLRS rocket that has the range of 90 kilometers, can range all the way to the Perekop Isthmus, that narrow bit of land that connects Crimea to the mainland of Ukraine, if you will. And that part will be within range from Kherson. But without getting the ATACMS, the longer range system, we still can't hit facilities on Crimean Peninsula yet. While I have supported, I think, 95% of the Biden administration's approach to support for Ukraine, this is one area where I think we've got the policy wrong. That not providing ATACMS, for example, to Ukrainian forces, which have the 300-kilometer range, out of a concern that they would use it against Russian targets inside Russia. Of course they would. Of course they should. I mean, there are Ukrainians that are being murdered every day by rockets, Iskander missiles, aircraft, and drones that are being launched from inside Russia and inside Belarus. But the Ukrainian General Staff or the Kyiv has said, okay, we won't do that. Let them have ATACMS so that they can hit Russian targets in Crimea. It's exactly 300 kilometers from Odessa to Sevastopol. So if they had ATACMS, they could already be making Sevastopol untenable for the Black Sea Fleet, as well as the other Russian airfields, ammunition sites, headquarters, all the things, and of course, Kerch Bridge, and the other logistics capabilities that the Russians need to continue to defend in southern Ukraine. So I think this is the wrong policy. I wouldn't claim to be privy to conversations between Washington and Kyiv or London and Kyiv about what they can and can't do with their own capabilities, but I think that the Ukraine has got to be able to protect themselves, protect their citizens from these attacks. What these attacks on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure is all about is to weaponize refugees, to get hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians heading into Central and Western Europe in search of places to live, while not just during the winter, but because it's not just about heat, it's about water, it's all the things that depend on electricity, businesses, etc. So because the Russians realize that they have no chance of winning on the battlefield, I mean, Ukrainians have irreversible momentum. So the only chance for the Russians is to drag this out in hopes that we all lose the will to continue supporting Ukraine. So by weaponizing the refugees and also trading bodies for time, these very unlucky, recently mobilized soldiers who are being fed into the battle as cannon fodder, is all about dragging this out. And I think my frustration or the flaws in my own assessment are that I don't know how much more the Russians have in terms of precision weapons. I see different reports like you do of estimates that they're down to 30% or 40% remaining of different types of weapons. There have been reports of pretty high failure rates of some of the weapons, that they either don't hit the target or they don't detonate, or they're not as effective. So there's a quality thing, fortunately, in some of the weapons. And because of sanctions, they're not able to replenish all that they are using. The artillery that's being fired, I mean, they have had to pull things out of storage. So you've got older systems and ammunition that is not been properly stored. I mean, artillery ammunition is not like hammers. You just leave them on the shelf forever and then use it whenever you're ready. They have to be properly stored, maintained. Typically, armies in peacetime, you use oldest ammunition for training, so that you've got the newest ammunition for crises, and it's kind of a process there. The Russians obviously are deep into old ammunition now, and of course the rate of fire that most of them are using, and the Ukrainians, by the way, exceeds all the normal planning figures. So it's not just about ammunition consumption, it's about the wear and tear on the howitzers themselves. I mean, for an American howitzer, and I suspect for British howitzers, British Army and German and others, for an American howitzer, depending on the rate of fire, generally speaking, after 2,000 rounds, the tube has to be replaced. Well, these artillery pieces that the Russians and Ukrainians use are way beyond 2,000. So part of the logistics supply chain, if you will, has to include getting in new tubes for the artillery. Where are those being manufactured? If you don't replace them, at some point you're going to have structural failure in the breech, which leads to either loss of capability, the rounds don't go as far, they're not as accurate, or you have an explosion and it kills or injures a lot of the crew members. Look, we have sergeants all over the place that are constantly working to help make sure soldiers don't hurt themselves, through either dangerous driving, unsafe driving, how you handle explosives, weapons. I mean, that's part of the reason having sergeants in our formations is so important, is because they have experience and they can anticipate when a young private is going to make a mistake. And of course, it's a dangerous environment to begin with. You don't have sergeants in the Russian army that are on top of these kind of things, making sure people are not. We call it muzzle awareness. You know, that your weapon is loaded and that you're not pointing at another soldier, and accidents that can happen, or the mishandling of explosives. And we've all seen the pictures of how Russians dump artillery ammunition on the side of the road, and it's incredible. For aircraft accidents, of course, if you're not trained, you know, pilots in the Royal Air Force and the U.S. Air Force and other NATO air forces spend hundreds of hours every year in the cockpit, but also in simulators, dealing, you know, making sure they can maintain a level of proficiency. That's also very expensive. And what we're seeing is that Russian Air Force does not have that level of, they have not invested in the training level to do that. And so a pilot who's not experienced and well trained in a high performance aircraft, you know, the chances of accidents go up. And then finally, equipment failure. I think one of the things that I missed before February that I had failed to anticipate was the impact of corruption on Russian military performance. You know, I mean, I overestimated their capabilities, and I think I did not appreciate the depth of corruption that shows up in lack of quality control of what the defense industry provides to the services. I mean, there's a, you know, we have people that's their job, is to constantly make sure that equipment that's provided meets the specification of the contract, et cetera. And it's obvious that has not been happening in Russia for some time. So this, not only has this been a catastrophe for Russian military forces and the government, not too many people are going to be interested in buying Russian kit for several years. You think about it, everything that a soldier uses, wears, eats, drinks, everything he or she does, there's got to be a supply chain that provides it. And while it's cool to sort of mock the tooth to tail ratio and that sort of thing, the fact is modern warfare requires enormous amounts of maintenance, fuel, and if you've got 100,000 soldiers, that's 100,000 soldiers that have got to eat 2 or 3 times a day. They have to have ammunition. They need boots, socks, belt buckles, everything. And the report that I saw, like over 1 million bits of winter warfare equipment, clothing, gone missing. I'm skeptical that much ever existed, but somebody probably got paid for it anyway. And then the report that they're having to import winter uniforms from North Korea. I mean, if that's true, how bad must it be inside the Russian economy that the country that has Siberia has to import winter uniforms from North Korea? I spoke with a gentleman the other day who was a former South Korean soldier, and he told me that the quality of what North Korean soldiers wear in wintertime is terrible. So I can only imagine what this is going to be like if that report is true. The bottom line is that the Russian logistics system was never designed to support sustained large-scale land operations outside of Russia. They never thought they would have to do it, and so they don't have the infrastructure. So they're clumsily trying to push stuff to the front, but they don't have it. And of course, the Ukrainians, who know everything there is to know about the Russians, the people, the organizations, the weaknesses as well as the strengths, you know, have very cleverly targeted the logistics system, going after rail networks, transport capabilities, and artillery ammunition as a way to defeat Russian forces. And this is why they have so cleverly gone after the Kerch Bridge and the land bridge, the only 2 land lines of communication into Crimea. So Crimea, in effect, becomes a trap for Russian forces. You know, again, on my long list of personal mistakes where I overestimated Russian capabilities, they have no operational experience. I mean, I had sort of thought, okay, man, they were in Georgia, Syria, Africa. I thought they must have so much operational experience. And it turns out that only about 5% of the military, including the Air Force and Navy, actually had operational experience. And very, very little of that was against anything like fighting against Ukrainians, except in the Donbass region. And the Ukrainians stopped them in the Donbass region. So I should have picked up on that. What the Russians do well is mass. As long as they got lots of people and lots of artillery, they clearly are willing to absorb any number of casualties as long as they can keep pounding away. Ukrainians know this, of course, and so they're looking at ways, how do they undermine or degrade Russia's ability to do these things. And you can have 10, 20, 30,000 brand new troops sitting in trenches. That does not equal fighting power. We know from millennia of history that soldiers fight for things, for their comrades, for understanding what this is all about. And in the case of Ukrainians, they're defending their homeland. The Russians are not. They don't want to be there. They're not defending their homeland. They know that their leaders don't care about them, and that is, I think, as weather gets worse and worse over the next couple of months, I would really hate to be a Russian private recently mobilized sitting in a bunker as HIMARS are raining in on top of me. So this is normal for Russians in war. This is the Russian way of war for centuries. In part, the nature of the society. It's a brutal society, and when you've got so much corruption from top to bottom, it's not a big jump to get to where you have organizations where theft and brutal treatment is tolerated, almost expected, and then the next step is murdering civilians with their hands tied behind their back in towns that you capture. And so, and the theft of everything that we've seen. I mean, it's kind of funny at first, but then when you think about it, I mean, if they're stealing washing machines and refrigerators, you can imagine what's happening to the people that live there, the treatment that's going on. So no, this is not just part of war. Terrible things happen in war, but nobody should think for a second that it's accepted as the norm. Over the last couple of centuries, a lot of work has been done to try and limit the destruction, the brutality, and to limit the targeting of civilians. It's a violation of war. It's a war crime to target civilian infrastructure that is not directly related to military requirements, capability. So everything that the Russians are doing now is a violation of multiple articles of the Geneva Convention. Fortunately, the ICC, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, is on the case, literally, taking a look at the various war crimes, of which there is ample photographic and personal evidence that's out there. So people are already starting to do those kind of things. And in particular, this terrible, I hate to even think about it, but the deportation of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian kids that are being sent to Russia. Exactly what Stalin did. I mean, this was a Stalinist tactic, but the czars did it also to move populations around, to gain control, to depopulate areas. It's an element of genocide. Genocide is not just killing everybody, it's depopulating an area to change the demographic balance there. And this is what's been going on. It's part of the design. Putin's objective from the beginning has been the destruction of Ukraine as a state and the idea of Ukraine as a state. It's going to take a long, long time for it to fade into distant memory. It's going to be very interesting and important that we watch closely what happens in Russia over the next 6 months or so, as this catastrophe continues to unfold and as more and more Russians become increasingly aware of it, and as the effects of sanctions and battlefield casualties and all the disruptions of what passes for normal life in Russia are felt by more and more Russians. But as a outsider looking in, it feels like what's just below the surface is going to burst onto the surface pretty soon in terms of the competition. you know, Dr. Timothy Snyder the other day, he said, yes, it's bad to lose in Ukraine. It is much worse to lose in Russia. And so when people say, how can you even imagine that Putin would leave Ukraine or that they would lose? I mean, as if that's impossible to imagine that the Russians would lose or that they would leave. Now, they will absolutely leave when they realize that just continuing to get beaten in Ukraine is going to lead to the fall of the regime, or their own ouster will cause people to start protecting themselves inside Russia. The normal sort of command and control, the structure for planning and making decisions, strategic thinking is not in place there. The only winner in a negotiation would be Russia. Of course, that's what they want, is to put pressure on European capitals and on the U.S. to put pressure on Kyiv to hurry. Oh, come on, we got to stop this. It's terrible. It's so expensive. We got to. All wars end in negotiation. I hear this all the time now, and so the Russians would benefit from that. It would give them a chance to rebuild and regroup and get their act together to deal with the deep-rooted problems they've got which have been exposed. And so it would also entail Ukraine forfeiting sovereign territory. So, in other words, Russia's war would be rewarded. And I don't know how anybody, serious person, thinks that this is the right step to take. And I think there are some really good, smart people that are having a hard time getting their head around the idea that Russia is going to be defeated, because they can't imagine, because that would undo decades of what we believed or what we thought we believed. And so it's hard to break free from some of our own previous assumptions or beliefs. There are certain ideas that are out there that don't make sense, but because people are either they are in their own memories, or they haven't challenged it, or they have assumptions that need to be challenged. When I hear, well, surely there's going to be I mean, somebody even used the fighting season framework, which we used in Afghanistan. There was a fighting season because when it was pouring rain, the Taliban they went back to Pakistan or they stayed home. So there was, in a way, a fighting season. There is no fighting season in Ukraine. And when I hear people talk about, well, of course they'll have to slow down, they're going to stop during the winter. No, in the 18th century, people stopped during winter because there was no forage for the horses. But that's not a requirement now. And yes, trafficability for wheeled vehicles is more difficult, particularly in that part of Ukraine. The soil is really a mess when it's wet, but tracked vehicles can still move. And yes, visibility will be lessened, which is a problem for some of the drones that are just purely optical visual capabilities. But the Ukrainian soldiers are going to be much better equipped to continue operations during the winter than are the Russian soldiers. I mean, there are so many things. Not only do things move slower, but equipment needs different types of lubricants. For example, you're going to use up a lot more fuel because soldiers will sit in vehicles and keep the engine running for the heat, or they're going to be needing fuel for heated facilities. I mean, all of these things add to the logistical burden, and that weak, fragile Russian logistics system is getting worse and weaker by the day. So the Ukrainians, I am convinced, will want to keep pressure on the Russians throughout the winter, not give them a chance to get back up on their feet, to rebuild. Again, they don't take orders from the general staff. And you remember there was about 3 years ago, maybe, where some Wagner soldiers ran into American soldiers in Syria, and they were slaughtered. And there is some reporting that the Wagner guys were allowed by the Russian general staff to get slaughtered. They didn't get any support, and it was a message to Prigozhin. He'll remember that, of course. Growing his force and saving it for his own purposes back inside Russia, should it be necessary, or should he see opportunity. In the post-World War II era, Almost every war, major war that we've seen or in which we've participated, first of all, they were never declared wars. They were known as operations or police actions or different, operated under a UN mandate or something like that. So the idea of a decisive conflict, a decisive victory to bring about termination of a conflict seems, I think, to so many people as old-fashioned, because the assumption was that somehow the Soviets or the Chinese would have used a nuclear weapon, that it would somehow end up in a nuclear conflict. And so that I think that caused us all to move towards negotiated conclusions, whether we're talking about Korea, Vietnam, various other conflicts around the world. I mean, the only exception, I could be found out as being wrong very quickly by some of the listeners, but think of Desert Storm. Obviously, that was a conflict that was brought to a very quick, decisive termination. Although people would argue that it didn't go far enough, but nonetheless, in accordance with the war aims, that was decisive. The Israelis, of course, have achieved a decisive victory at times, but that didn't bring about eternal peace either. So I think that's part of it. We've gotten into several decades of non-conclusive or non-decisive, I should say, endgame. That's why this feels probably awkward for many people. They can't imagine that. You mean there's going to be one army has to leave the battlefield? I think that's what's going to happen. And this is not happening in a vacuum. I mean, all of this chaos that's happening in Russia, economic, political violence, is going on, and Russia's main ally right now, Iran, is dealing with very, very serious problems of their own right now. And the Chinese must just be watching and anticipating when they can regain some of the territory that they lost to the Tsar centuries ago. So Russia is in a bad place, and at some point, I think they were going to have to leave Ukraine the way we had to leave Vietnam and we had to leave Afghanistan, and take and secure themselves at home. I think the Chinese are indeed watching, and they've been extracting resources from Russia for some time, and the Russians actually can't stop it. I mean, they don't have the population or the capabilities to even stop that. But the Chinese are also watching, I think, to see, can the West stick together and help Ukraine defeat Russia? Are we willing to put up with some high energy prices and other disruptions for a period of time in order to see this through, to help Ukraine finish this and defeat Russia? If we're not willing to do that, then that'll be a message to the Chinese that maybe we're not able to stick together to deter or stop them in the South China Sea. This is also frustrating for me. Why does it feel like we're spooning out capabilities to the Ukrainians? Now, Secretary Austin, I'm sure, would say, wait, $40 billion is hardly spooning out anything. But in terms of capabilities, why does the administration have a hard time saying we want Ukraine to win? I mean, those words were issued only one time. Secretary Austin said, we're going to help Ukraine win, and we're going to damage Russia enough so that they can't threaten their neighbors anymore. That was never heard again. I mean, that was the White House put a clamp on that. And so we're not willing to provide the ATACMS that we talked about earlier. We're still, unbelievably, we're not willing to provide tanks. We have thousands of tanks that could be refurbished and provided, as do the Germans. And of course, the Germans say, well, if the Americans aren't doing it, why should we have to provide tanks? And so that all stems from we're just not able to bring ourselves to say we want Ukraine to win. We want Russia to say we want Russia to lose. That's like 75% of saying we want Ukraine to win. And I think there are still good people in our governments that are worried about an escalation, which I just think is not going to happen. So I think the international community has got to be working 24/7 right now, putting pressure on the Kremlin to make sure that nothing happens at Zaporizhia or up at Ostrovets at the nuclear power plant in southwestern Belarus. I just came from Lithuania, and they're very worried about that. So this is 100% the responsibility of the Kremlin, and I think the international community, everybody, has an interest in making sure that Russia does not allow that to happen. That's got to be at the top of the to-do list. As far as what happens to the Russian military after this, the United States Army, we had to do a lot of soul searching and reform after Vietnam. We had thousands of sergeants had been killed. We were American society in the mid-70s was not in a good place, and we had to rebuild ourselves, and it took a complete change of culture, of self-criticism, of what we call the after-action review, and changing our training model, where you go to the National Training Center and you get beat over and over and over until you finally get better. So hard, realistic training, and then investing in our NCO education system. Those were the three things. I had an old guy tell me those three things saved the U.S. Army after Vietnam. And thankfully, we had the right leaders in place to be willing to do that. I don't know that Russia has enough senior people. They're very smart, they're well educated, but the culture of accepting responsibility for something that went wrong, that's what it's going to take. You can't fix something until you can identify why is it broken, what happened, how did it happen. That will require a serious cultural change. Otherwise, Russia will just build back what they started this with. The part I cannot explain, of course, is why is it that it seems the women of Iran are more courageous than the people of Russia? I mean, why? I'm not a Russia expert, but and I know they have this immense, comprehensive internal security structure, and also the culture doesn't create the incentives for people to come out in the street. But I think it feels like around the edges, you hear a little bit more as people get the courage to speak out, to complain. The famous mothers who were so visible during Afghanistan, you start to see little bits and pieces of that now. Not enough to change Kremlin policy, but it's there. And I think if the Kremlin were to announce another mobilization, it would be another humiliating exodus of thousands of military-age males leaving the country again. There's no doubt that the Putin, the recently indicted President Putin, by the way, has worked hard over the last 2 decades to capture the historical narrative, to take the narrative of the Soviet Union and make it the narrative of Russia. Perhaps during the time of the Soviet Union, where you still had people that had literally survived, their parents and grandparents, and even themselves survived the so-called Great Patriotic War, where the Soviet Union was attacked. That's missing now. And I think, of course, there will be a percentage of people, just like there are in the United States, a large percentage of people that will buy into this false narrative. Younger Russians probably don't feel the threat that Putin describes out there, and I think that's what makes this a little bit different. I mean, when they announced the mobilization last September, and 500,000 military-age males left the country, that was a heck of an insight into how Russians think about this. This nonsense about Crimea is like Holy Land almost for the Russians. No, it's not. It's a great place to go holiday, but when those people, you remember the video of the people at the beach there when the air base nearby was hit. I mean, the next day they were driving as fast as they could to get out of there. Nobody was going to the recruiting office saying, "Hey, I want to fight and defend Crimea." No. I mean, I can remember as a lieutenant in 1981 in northern Germany, everything was about deterrence. It was the height of the Cold War. We were modernizing, big exercises. And I can vividly remember my battalion commander talking about the importance of maintenance. You had to be ready to fight tonight. We didn't want to have convoys with vehicles broken down on the side of the Autobahn, because that would send a signal to the Soviets that we were not ready to fight. And so, I mean, there was an intensity about readiness that you would expect when your potential adversary just 3 or 4 hours away on the other side of the inter-German border with 1 million troops and part of their own alliance, the Warsaw Pact. Chemical weapons, we trained chemical environment, we trained for tactical nuclear environment. It was very real. But at the same time, I can remember people saying, okay, settle down. Yes, they have millions of people. Yes, they have thousands of tanks. Yes, they practice this, but they are not 10 feet tall. They still have issues. They still have weaknesses that we can exploit. So there was caution even back then. Certainly, I was guilty when I was commander of NATO's Land Command in Izmir from 12 to 14, and then of U.S. Army Europe from 14 to 17, of overestimating Russian capabilities. I got locked in on their modernization effort, the amount of money they were spending on new kit, and of course you hear the size, oh, they have 1 million plus or whatever. At the same time, in U.S. Army Europe, the last tanks had just left. I mean, we didn't even have an armor brigade anymore, and the Bundeswehr was downsizing. The UK, the British Army, was leaving the continent, and on and on and on. The Dutch had given away all of their tanks, or sold them. The Dutch don't give away. They had sold their Leopards. And so I think we had 4 ships for U.S. Navy Europe. That was it. And so, yes, of course, I was concerned. But what I failed to appreciate is the impact and the depth of corruption, top to bottom, in the system. False reporting, poor quality assurance, lack of stuff. I mean, storage of ammunition. I mean, these are all things that were suffered from corruption. And then the last thing, of course, is I misread what they were doing in Georgia and Ukraine and Syria and Africa. It was actually a very, very small percentage of the military that was actually doing these things. It was Wagner, or it was the airborne units. So they actually had no real experience, operational experience. And if you don't have operational experience and you don't do meaningful exercises where you train to the point of failure, which they don't, then you end up with a poor command structure and a logistics system that's not fit for purpose. I miss that. You know, the idea that Russia was being encircled by NATO, the amount of Russia's frontier that actually touched NATO is about 6%, of their frontier. The safest part of their border, the part from which they would never be attacked, but the part that touched Estonia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, you know, from the Black Sea, that they were never going to be attacked from any NATO country. And I think, of course, they knew that, but they needed this narrative to, number one, justify a huge expense or investment in military, but also to distract people from how bad things actually were. The biggest threat was not NATO, it was a Ukraine that was liberal Democrat, a liberal democratic society that was prosperous because it was about to join the European Union, that people could come and go. That was a real threat. I mean, that would give lie to so much of the narrative coming out of the Kremlin that he could not afford to have that happen. And so if you look at all the places where they have these so-called frozen conflicts, you know, Abkhazia and South Ossetia and Georgia, Transnistria, the Donbass that the Russians took back in 14, life is no better now than it was the day they showed up. I mean, they don't invest in any of that. They just want to create this sort of buffer around themselves. But against what? And I think it's they don't want prosperous European countries on their border. But there's no doubt that if the Russian losses are 3 times the Ukrainian losses, or 4 times, or 7 times, or whatever it is, that's significant. I mean, Russia does not have unlimited manpower. There's this image that we all have of this gigantic country because geographically it is, of course, massive, 11 or 12 time zones, et cetera. Kremlin is continuing the old Tsarist tradition of using their minorities and people from out in the poorest parts of the empire that's who's bearing the brunt of the casualties. I don't think there are too many funerals happening from families in Moscow or St. Petersburg, at least not yet. And we constantly see on social media the sons and daughters of the super elites that are working in London or a holiday in Dubai or still carrying on doing what they want to do. So that will eventually come back to haunt them, I think. Ukraine has lost and is losing a lot of soldiers. Now, the general staff does a very good job of protecting information. We don't know how many they've lost, how much equipment they've lost. I have to tip my hat to them. We know more about the Russians than we do about the Ukrainians, but I understand the why. And certainly almost every day you'll see a picture of a Ukrainian soldier that was killed, and you'll find out he was a famous geologist, or he was an actor or a writer or something, a scientist, which is why we want this to end as soon as possible, with Ukraine having restored all of its territory, because they are losing people. In terms of numbers, they can go on. I mean, they 40 million still inside Ukraine, so probably 2 million more women and men military age that could continue to fill the ranks as necessary. So they won't run out of people, but this clearly is going to have a long-term impact on Ukraine's future and their ability to rebuild. I think, though, if the United States and UK would say Ukraine not only can win, Ukraine will win, and we want them to win. That's our stated objective, which is missing now, is for them to win. Then, if that happens, then all the excuses about why we haven't provided certain things, those fall away. So there are 2 or 3 factors that are out there, I think, that impact this. Obviously, President Xi is in Russia now for his visit, and the Chinese would like to be in the position of helping to bring about a peaceful settlement and that sort of thing. And I think the Russians would love to have some kind of a settlement where they don't lose anything that they already have. This would be a disaster for Ukraine, and it would be terrible for all the rest of us to see Russia be rewarded for any of its aggressive behavior. And Crimea, of course, which is the thing that gets batted around as possible. Come on, let them have Crimea so we can stop this. That's a guarantee that Ukraine will never rebuild its economy, and that it's the launching pad for Russia to resume things in 2 or 3 years when they're ready. So that's out there in the near term. American domestic politics, the burden is on my president to explain why this matters. And I think, actually, what I saw at the Munich Security Conference back in February, where the largest U.S. congressional delegation ever to attend the Munich Security Conference was there, including a large number of Republicans, led by the Republican Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. And Mr. McConnell stood up at an event and said, I am here, along with almost all of the Senate Republican leadership and many leaders from the House, to say that we are here to support Ukraine, to support Europe, to support NATO. And of course, and then he went on Fox TV and said the same thing that night and said, look, and what he's trying to do is separate the core of the leadership of the Republican Party from the extremist voices that are out there that are making ridiculous comments like, this is a regional border dispute or something like that. So that gives me confidence. And the fact that the Congress has continued to support Ukraine in a very strong bipartisan way. I mean, all of this aid would not be happening if it was just Democrats pushing for it. So I've seen enough commentary and evidence of strong Republican support for this that I am not so worried that next year, by the end of 2024, when there's another election, that this will dry up. But again, the burden is on the current administration to explain why this is in America's interest. Exactly what Senator McConnell said. This is in America's interest, that Europe is stable, secure, and prosperous, because our prosperity is tied to it. that the so-called international rules-based order, which means sovereignty of borders, every Republican cares about sovereignty of borders, free trade, freedom of navigation, which is part of trade in America, depends on trade, and all these other aspects of things. That's our interest. And then, of course, the fact that the Chinese are watching to see, can we get this done? Can we stick together? And so when Republicans say we need to be focused on the Chinese, this is about China. So at the risk of sounding like a scratched record, this is all about the strategic outcome that we want. If the president says we want Ukraine to win, we want them to win, then all of these excuses about how long it'll take to train, or this tank burns too much fuel, or there's so many excuses have been deployed to explain why we're not doing exactly what you just described, because we haven't said we want to win. The administration, despite the amazing job they've done on so much of this, still continues to self-deter because of, I think, an exaggerated concern about Russia somehow is going to pull out some sort of way to escalate that we haven't anticipated, or that they would actually use a nuclear weapon of some sort. And I think the administration has got to get over that. They're not going to use a nuclear weapon. But even if they did use a tactical nuclear weapon, the administration would have to follow through on what they said, catastrophic consequences. And as I said earlier, we used to train to operate in an environment where the Soviets used lots of tactical nuclear weapons. This is not, Dr. Strangelove or Hiroshima type nuclear weapons. I'm not downplaying the significance of it. I'm saying that everybody else that has a nuke or thinks they might want to have a nuke, they're waiting to see, can the U.S. be so easily deterred by Russia threatening to use a nuclear weapon? If that's the case, then there will be a increased emphasis by everybody to get their own nuclear weapons, because clearly that's the thing. But if the U.S., with support of allies, is able to bat that aside, then that will take a lot of the steam out of Iran, North Korea, and other ne'er-do-wells who think that they need to have a nuclear weapon. And I think that's what it's going to take. If you believe that the outcome should be Ukrainian victory, establishing sovereignty over all of its territory, then that quickly takes you to the recognition or the realization that Crimea is the decisive terrain. You could kill every Russian soldier within 150 miles of Bakhmut, and that would not change the strategic outcome. Bakhmut is not strategically important from a geographical or operational standpoint. It's important because the Russians are bleeding themselves out there. But you liberate Crimea, that changes everything. And I think it would create such chaos on the Russian side as well. And so everything that the Ukrainian General Staff is doing now, I believe, is using what we would call doctrinally economy of force in the Donbass area, training and building up an armored force that's going to launch a strike, I think, in June. That's when the conditions will be set from weather, logistics, preparation, and they're going to attack on a very narrow front that would penetrate these Russian defenses and break the so-called land bridge and isolate Crimea. And then they'll be able to bring up more long-range weapons that can make Crimea untenable. So what do we need to provide to Ukraine? Long-range precision strike capability. Whether that comes in the form of a fixed-wing aircraft, ATACMS, the 300-kilometer range weapon, endless amounts of small-diameter ground-launched small-diameter bombs, Gray Eagle drones, all the different things that are out there. That's what's needed to make the peninsula untenable. I mean, Crimea is the size, for your American listeners or for your listeners who have been to the States, the state of Massachusetts is the 7th smallest state in America. It's exactly the same size as Crimea, 27,000 square kilometers, which is about 10,500 square miles. Every taxi driver in Kyiv knows where every key site is on Crimea. There's nowhere to hide. So if you give them precision weapons, then the Black Sea Fleet has to vacate Sevastopol. the big logistics hub at Zhankoy, which just got hit last night, by the way, by a Ukrainian drone. It goes away. I mean, it becomes a bonfire. That's what they need. If you watch it every day, you're thinking, come on, when's this going to happen? When are we going to do this? And my God, where's the tanks and what's happening? And I would say that the Ukrainian General Staff is very professional. They have demonstrated an understanding of the operational art, the operational level of war, very Clausewitzian, very disciplined, and their ability to protect information. Has us all guessing, when's this going to happen or whatever. And if you step back, don't get caught up in the terrible fighting that's happening every day in trenches and in these destroyed cities, but step back from and think, look at the map. After 9 years, Russia controls barely 15% of Ukraine. The only part that really matters for them is Crimea and the land bridge that connects Crimea back to Russia, plus this famous Kerch bridge. That's all they really care about. And the Ukrainian General Staff sees this. And so I think they're going to be able to penetrate. I mean, when I hear, oh my God, there's miles and miles and miles of trenches, great. They're filled with unlucky conscripts, and most of them are not going to be attacked because they're out somewhere that doesn't need to be attacked. The most unlucky ones are the ones that are on this, what probably ends up being a, I don't know, 50 or 60 kilometer wide area where the main effort's going to happen. And it's going to be comprehensive, combined arms, tanks, mechanized infantry, self-propelled artillery, armored engineers. I think you're going to see extensive effort by partisans as well as special forces throughout the depth of this penetration. And I think we're going to see a lot of Russian prisoners, and you're going to see people leaving. And it's the kind of thing that can really be decisive. Of course, I have Air Force friends that watch closely Ukrainian Air Force, and they say the sortie generation is probably about 10% of capability, and they're not doing what you would normally as much. And I think that the Russian Air Force, and I say this as an infantry soldier, that the Ukrainian Air Force is probably husbanding aircraft as well to be a part of this, wherever this strike is going to take place. So I remain very optimistic. So when you look at the map, of course, if the Russians retain control of Crimea, they block access in and out of Azov Sea. So even if all of Donbass were liberated and Mariupol and Verdansk were returned to Ukrainian sovereign control, they would never be able to rebuild as major seaports because Russia still controls access in and out of Azov Sea. So that's a major problem for rebuilding Ukraine's economy. Odessa is exactly 300 kilometers straight line distance from Sevastopol. So the Russian Black Sea Fleet is able to disrupt anything coming in and out of Odessa. I mean, this grain deal, why in the hell does Russia get to say whether or not Ukraine can export grain? And it's only because of the Black Sea Fleet sitting right there. So this is why I think Crimea is such a decisive bit of terrain for the long haul. And of course, it's also the launching pad. When Black Sea Fleet's right there, they sail out, they launch missiles against apartment buildings, and they go back into port because they are terrified of getting anywhere too close to the Ukrainian shoreline. Air bases, multiple places from which the Russians are launching drone strikes, missile strikes, air strikes, and there's this huge logistics hub at Zhankoy on the northern part of the Crimean Peninsula. So this is the foundation, the jumping off point, if you will, for the next war, and this is why it has to be eliminated. The loss of Crimea would create serious problems. It's hard to imagine that Putin remains in power after that. I don't seek regime change, but I think I do seek hope that Ukraine is successful in winning and regaining sovereignty, and that the Russians are held accountable for war crimes, that these thousands of children are brought back home to Ukraine, and that Ukraine is able to rebuild itself and defend itself in the future. That won't happen if the Russians retain Crimea. We should not be scared of Russia losing. I can't imagine that there's somebody worse than Putin waiting to take over. There may be somebody more evil, but in terms of ability to do terrible things, it's not going to be any worse. And I think that the Russian people will have to decide what comes next for them. When if you reflect back on how people described Putin before February last year, and maybe a few years ago, that he was always referred to as the former KGB officer, as if that gave him special powers and super intelligence, and that he could play chess and Go simultaneously while standing on his head, and he was running circles around all of us. He was just such a brilliant strategist. And now, the guy that complained that NATO was encircling Russia, because of his actions, the amount of NATO that touches Russia is about to double when Finland becomes a member of the alliance. So he's done that. He took a nation of 44 million Ukrainians that, generally speaking, got along with or tolerated, or there was some sort of a cultural, historical, economic, and family relationship between Russia and Ukraine. He's now got 44 million Ukrainians that absolutely hate him and Russia. So, and now, of course, the president of the Russian Federation is the indicted president of the Russian Federation with an arrest warrant out there for his arrest. And so his ability to do things on behalf of Russia is going to be severely limited. Of course, I'm anxious to see what comes out of President Xi's visit to Russia, but he's not going to be able to go too many places and act on behalf of the Russian people. And I think they'll try and explain it. And I saw Medvedev's wonderful quote yesterday where he said, they're going to launch a strike against the ICC in The Hague. I mean, that guy is clearly certifiable. I think the Chinese are quite happy to see all of us. I mean, they would like to see us fail, not necessarily see Russia win, but they would like to see us struggle, use up resources. That would not be bad for them. They also want to continue getting cheap Russian gas. But there's no doubt that Russia is the junior partner now in this friendship without limits, that Russia is the junior partner. And so I think President Xi, now that he's started his third term, he's thinking about his own legacy. He's thinking about China, which has its own serious demographic issues and economic issues. It's not good for China that this war continues. And for sure, I am very confident that he has told President Putin, do not use a nuclear weapon. There'll be no positive outcome for anybody if Russia uses a nuclear weapon. Another reason that I think this is unlikely. Now, this subject does, of course, remind everybody that the United States and the UK and France are also not signatories to the Rome Statute, which gives the jurisdiction for the International Criminal Court in The Hague. My own government, our government, is going through a process now trying to figure out, is there a way that we can provide intelligence, for example, that would be useful as evidence to help the court in its prosecution of Putin and Ms. Belova without setting a precedent. I personally, this is not a widely held opinion, but I personally wish that we would go ahead and be signatories, because I think it undermines our credibility. I understand why we are not, but it undermines our credibility, and that'll be used against us. Last thing is on this, the fact that the court went public with this when they did was to put people on notice that you are going to be indicted. And I think this will cause people below the Putin level to start thinking, oh man, if I'm responsible for an area where we're taking children out of Zaporizhia, for example, then they know that they're being watched. And the idea of an international tribunal that could go after the other cases, that would begin to make the people that keep Putin in power, put them on notice that there is going to be accountability. I think this is just as important as delivering 300-kilometer range ATACMS. the collective, we have learned a lot over the past year about use of sanctions, about how, where all the little loopholes are, and who does a good job of fulfilling obligations, and who looks the other way. This has been instructive. And of course, I would remind that we've only been at this for a little over a year now. And already in a year, Russia's economy, I think, for the average person, is not very good. Putin was complaining the other day publicly that they don't have enough skilled defense industry workers. That's a remarkable statement. And at the same time, of course, he's sending thousands of people to their death fighting against Ukraine. So the fact that they are pleading with North Korea and China and Iran for ammunition and weapons, that's Russia, right? I think they have real problems. They cannot replace the long-range precision weapons that they've been launching against apartment buildings because of sanctions. Turkey, which is a extremely important but often frustrating ally, has thus far not allowed Russia to bring any more ships up into the Black Sea. This is not inconsequential. And so we, the West, have got to think more strategically in more different ways, not just about giving weapons to Ukraine and talking about Ukraine as if it's an island. While the Ukrainians have done a much better job than the Russians in terms of the information domain there, we have not done a good job in Africa and the Middle East, where Russia is able to portray somehow it's our fault that grain is not being delivered, when in fact it's 100% the Russians' fault that grain is not being delivered. So you're right, we have vulnerabilities in those regions. We'll be interested to see, I think in May is the next BRICS sort of conference in South Africa. Will South Africa do what they're obligated to do, which is to arrest President Putin if he shows up for this? That's going to be must-see TV. Two or three things that have received a lot of attention. Obviously, industrial capacity for defense requirements, specifically ammunition production. People months ago started wringing their hands like, oh my God, we're using up all this ammo. But US government, the German government, I don't know about UK, but they did not spend any money to increase production until just this last month. So after a year of talking about, oh my God, there was no money that was spent. So our defense industries, these are not charities. They have thousands of employees. They have long, complex supply chains. The EU is working hard now. They just made an agreement to provide 1 million rounds of artillery ammunition, both from their own stocks as well as new procurement. But the TNT and some of the other components that are required to make, it's gone. I mean, there's not enough out there. So somebody has to make that. And so everybody's searching far and wide for what's necessary. So industry can react fast, but the political will to do it. I mean, Armin Papperger from the head of Rheinmetall, for months he's been saying, hey, I've got mortars, I've got tanks, they're sitting on the parking lot ready to go. Just give me the order. We'll start paying for the refurbishment, or we'll start doing the refurbishment and they'll be ready to go. And he never got those from the German government. So the point is industrial capacity, but it takes political will. And that's a hard sell when there's not an obvious threat to say we're going to spend zillions of pounds or euros or dollars on something you hope sits in a depot and never gets used. That's hard. The second thing is air and missile defense. We clearly do not have enough air and missile defense capability to do the job in Europe. We have one battalion of Patriot for the U.S. That's just enough to protect Ramstein Air Base. What we know now is that Russia will use precision weapons against civilian targets. So the requirement for air and missile defense is more than just a few air bases and seaports. It's hundreds of millions of citizens. We're not ready for that. And plus you have to practice and exercise that. The third thing I would say, we don't want to learn the wrong lesson. And by the way, I'm a simple infantry soldier. I'm not a tanker, so I'm not. This is not me advocating, for saving tanks. But you could walk away from this saying, "Oh, look at all these videos of tanks getting blown apart every day by drone strikes. It's the end of the tank." I mean, even the legendary military strategist Elon Musk, yeah, it is the end of tanks that are untrained, poorly or improperly employed, and sit out in the open. It should be the end of them. So every video I've seen of Russian tanks that were being lit up, every one of them, they were sitting out in the open, or they were bunched together, or they were moving through a town without proper infantry support. This is stuff that good sergeants would never allow to happen. But yet, what do the Ukrainians beg for? They want tanks because they know that they need protected mobile firepower on this very, very lethal battlefield. And I think you'll see British, German, and Ukrainian tanks playing a critical role, and also the French AMX and American Bradleys and others playing a critical role here this summer, penetrating the old-fashioned way, the Russian defenses. I think all of our armies and services are learning a lot from what Ukrainians and Russians are doing. The Russians have had success on counter-drone through non-kinetic electronic means, able to jam the signal so that a lot of Ukrainian drones never make it to their target or are not able to stay up. So that is creating a new capability or given capability to all combatants that is relatively inexpensive, and frankly does not you don't risk the loss of pilots or having to go get them and all of that. So I think everybody will be looking for ways to integrate drones into their operations. I would imagine in June we're going to see drones in a supporting way with reconnaissance, with strike, or perhaps going deeper to go after Russian troop movements or reinforcement. SACEUR General Cavoli said a few months ago, he said, precision can defeat mass if you have enough time. And I thought about that. And of course, what he's talking about, Russian mass depends on three things: headquarters, logistics, and artillery ammunition. I mean, those are three things. So if you are able to find and hit headquarters, when you think about the command structure and the method of command for Russian forces, mass infantry requires a directing headquarters. Their massed artillery requires ammunition that's dumped off at the side of the road at different places. If you can find those, and then on the transportation network, if you're able to eliminate whether it's train, railhead, bridges, then it doesn't matter how many thousands of unlucky conscripts the Wagner Group has. Those are three things that can all be eliminated by precision strike, whether it's from a drone, a HIMARS, or whatever it is. And the Russians know this, of course. That's why they moved all those things further back after the first HIMARS, the entry of HIMARS back a few months ago. This is, I think this is going to be a way to neutralize or defeat the only advantage the Russians have, which is mass. So for certain, Vladimir Putin is not this tower of power that we thought he was, and does not fit the image which he has been trying to cultivate for over 2 decades, which means that I think we have to reevaluate, our Western leadership, reevaluate what does he control, and how would he react if he's put in the corner. For years, there's been concern that if he's cornered, if he loses Crimea, or if this and this, then he's going to blow it all up. He'll use nuclear weapons. And here, where he was actually cornered this past weekend, he wilted in less than 12 hours. Changed from, we've been stabbed in the back, we got to destroy Wagner, to offering amnesty, basically, and a free pass to Belarus for Prigozhin. So I think that all of us have to reassess his strength and what he might do in a tight situation. We just got to look at it. First of all, what has happened over the last few days, of course, is not the type of thing, as James Scher would say, that occurs in armies that are confident that they're on the path to victory. I mean, so the fact that Prigozhin was so angry and was able to do what he did doesn't speak well for the capabilities and the leadership inside the Ministry of Defense. And yet, who's still in office as the Minister of Defense? Shoigu. So that tells us all that Putin values loyalty more than competence, because Shoigu has been incompetent and corrupt for going on a decade now. I imagine that the number of people that Vladimir Putin really can trust is much less today than what he thought it was a week ago. There was nobody in the streets rallying to support the president. You didn't see too many examples of oligarchs or military officials or government officials coming out and condemning what Prigozhin was doing. Apparently Wagner was able to take over the headquarters there in Rostov without any problem, which means there had to be this had to be something that was sorted in the beginning. And then, of course, I didn't see Lavrov until yesterday, and he made his usual nonsensical blaming the West for this whole thing was cooked up by the CIA or whatever. Didn't see the great patriarch Kirill. He made one weak statement the other day. So I think a lot of people are trying to figure out which way the wind is really blowing, and or they don't want to see Putin stay, but they're not confident yet that they can publicly come out and say that. So that's a long, rambling answer to your good question. He clearly does not control all of Russia. He clearly does not control all of his own military. And I think he hasn't conducted a purge yet because he's not confident that that would not start another mutiny. I think the U.S. administration and maybe some others were quite alarmed at what might happen if there was a collapse of the government, if the mutiny had not been aborted and it had led to a chain of events. You know, the concern of my president has always been about a nuclear escalation, or that somehow it becomes nuclear. And so even though nobody would mourn the loss of Vladimir Putin, people will be very concerned about who controls all the nukes. And I actually think that the chance of some sort of a nuclear escalation is now even less than it was before. To do it, to employ a tactical nuclear weapon would require a lot of people being involved in a chain of decision making, performing tasks. It's not something like this caricature where he just has a red button on his desk where he can start. I mean, it doesn't work like that. And I imagine that he has less confidence now that in the chain of command of people that would be involved in such an employment of a nuke. He cannot be very confident that they would even carry out the order. And I'm thinking about all of those people who can sense that, hey, this thing might be coming apart, or he might be gone. Do I really want to be personally associated with the decision and execution of an order to launch a nuclear weapon when the West and China have made it clear that that's going to be unacceptable? And so why in the world would I want to help a guy who is in his last days do that? So I think the chances of them using a nuclear weapon actually go down. I did see reports from a couple of really good reporters of the New York Times that described that our intelligence services became aware, maybe it was last Wednesday or something, that this was in the offing. And that the administration apparently chose not to do anything with it because they did not want to give Putin any excuse to say, look, this is the U.S. Told you, you guys, it's the CIA up to their old tricks, and so I think that there is no interest in keeping Putin in power, but I think there is going to be concern about loss of control of the nuclear weapons. I think China is involved in this somehow. I think China has been communicating to Washington that we don't want a collapse of the Federation. We want to maintain status quo as much as possible. And so I think the U.S. is feeling some pressure. I can't prove any of this. I don't know it, but just judging from the way the administration acts and how the Chinese Communist Party leadership speaks, to me, this is believable that they are wanting to prevent a collapse of the Russian Federation for their own purposes, political as well as economical reasons. And that has driven, I think, why the U.S. administration doesn't publicly come out and say, we want Ukraine to win, we're going to give them everything to win, which could lead to a total collapse of the Russian Federation leadership. Your use of the term dials is an excellent metaphor for what I think or how the administration and others are trying to manage this, as if it's a thermostat. If you just do a little bit of this and a little less of that, we'll be able to thread our way through the challenges. And I think that's naive. If anything, we ought to be able to see very clearly that we cannot manage what goes on inside Russia. Everything that they have done for the last 20 plus years has been because we thought we were managing them, and they were laughing at us the whole time. I mean, they saw that we weren't willing to do anything after Georgia, after they supported Assad using chemical weapons, despite an Obama red line. We, the West, did nothing of consequence after Crimea in 2014. Germans were still building Nord Stream 2 up until the end of 2021. U.S. domestic politics was an embarrassment during the Trump administration and then the transition. So we have not been able to manage Russia at all. And here we are in a war that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives, billions and billions and billions of dollars, pounds, and euro. And we still are acting like we can somehow turn the dial just a little bit. We're going to give Ukraine HIMARS, but we're not going to give them ATACMS. We're going to finally, after 16 months of hand-wringing, allow other countries to train them how to use F-16s, but we're not willing to do it. And it just, after watching how President Putin wilted this weekend, and then watching him yesterday, he looked smaller, weaker, more diminished than I've ever seen him since he first became a public figure. And we're still like, oh, I don't know, we can't give ATACMS, or we're not sure that we should let Ukraine into NATO. I mean, now is the time for some bold, courageous, clear strategic thinking, not this namby-pamby sort of dial spinning. Three or four points that I'd like to make in response to that. Number one, the UK has been leading on providing capabilities to Ukraine. Storm Shadow being the best example, but also tanks. But the Storm Shadow capability, long-range precision, is the thing that I think would be most helpful to Ukraine, because it would allow them to hit the headquarters and the Navy base at Sevastopol, make Crimea untenable, and accelerate Ukraine's ability to liberate Crimea, the decisive terrain of this conflict. Our UK has played a super role here. British intelligence a few months ago said that read out analysis that about 95% of Ukraine's land forces were committed to the fight in Ukraine. And I know quite a few people were like, what? Oh, no way, come on, Russia's so big. The fact is, about 95% of Russia's land forces are committed in Ukraine, and they're now in the process of losing. They're going to make up a difference of the 20 or 25,000 Wagner fighters, however many there really are. And I'm not confident in any of the numbers, but nonetheless, it's several thousand. That's been taken off the board. Yes, they've been offered amnesty. You can join the Russian army. I doubt many of these Wagner soldiers or mercenaries are going to be real interested in becoming cannon fodder in some regular Russian unit. So that's a chunk of combat power that's gone. Free Russia Legion that went into Belgorod and all of that. You would have thought that the Russians would have said, oh my gosh, we got to protect our own border here, the real motherland. And yet Prigozhin, when he starts his convoy, nobody lays a glove on him. Except for some aircraft that were all shot down. That told me that, no kidding, almost everything Russia has is in the fight in Ukraine. So if they can, in a way, I could never prove this. We'll have to find out if I'm even close. This could be an opportunity for Vladimir Putin to change the narrative and explain to his own country why the real threat is at home now, and he's got to bring everybody back. And we'll take care of Ukraine later. We'll come back to that. But I heard Lord Robertson a few weeks ago. He said, the Soviets made the decision to come out of Afghanistan. There was not a lot of hand wringing. They just did it, and that was it. An autocrat can change the narrative. He doesn't have to worry about tough journalists or the Duma questioning it. He could probably end this thing to save his own skin and to stay in power, which is, I think, his real priority. Mr. Prigozhin is a businessman and a showman. I mean, that's what drives him. I don't think he intended to actually carry out a coup to overthrow the government. I think this was a mutiny, and the mutiny is something done for leverage to get demands answered. And for him, it was to keep his business, not let it be subsumed into the ministry. He wanted to get rid of his arch enemy Shoigu. But I started thinking 400 vehicles, that was the estimate in this famous convoy. Okay, whether it was 200, 300, 400, something like that. But even if it was 500 vehicles would be swallowed up in the Moscow metro area before they got anywhere close to the Kremlin or Red Square. I mean, that's not a lot in a giant city. So you're not going to take over something unless you are really, really sure you had this thing totally wired on the inside and everybody was going to come out, which never happens. It didn't happen against Hitler. It didn't happen in Ankara a few years ago. And so I think he really genuinely just was trying to save his business and to get rid of his arch enemy. He's making a ton of money in Africa. And I think his contribution in Ukraine was he realized, okay, I'm not making any money here. I'm about to lose the whole thing. So I'm going to do this and demonstrate that I have some power. So total restoration of the 1991 borders, obviously that includes Crimea and Donbass, not only because that is in accordance with the law and the UN Charter, but it also is a message to everyone else. It's unacceptable to all of us that you can use force to change borders. And the Chinese will be watching this very closely as well. So that's number one. Ukraine will never be safe or secure so long as Russia occupies Crimea. They'll never be able to rebuild their economy so long as Russia occupies Crimea. Bringing back all of these kidnapped children, the thousands of Ukrainians who were distributed across Russia, that will be a forever task. But nonetheless, I think it's one that has to be done. The ICC International Criminal Court has already indicted Putin and his Minister of Children's Rights. What an interesting job title for her and what she's done. I think there will be more and more willingness for people to enforce or support that indictment than maybe there were, now that they've seen how truly weak he is. And it's more believable now than it was a month ago that at some point Russia hands over Vladimir Putin to the court the way Serbia handed over Milosevic. Not anytime soon, but it's more believable right now. And then, of course, I do sense a growing willingness or desire to have Ukraine in NATO. And I think the Vilnius summit coming up here in 2 weeks will be a failure if there is not a very strong, clear statement with concrete steps that Ukraine belongs in NATO and will be invited to NATO. I think usually when people say, no, we can't do it because they're at war, and that would mean automatic Article 5, and we're not going to do that. No, that's a completely wrong-headed understanding of what this all means. An invitation to Ukraine does not equal membership. It normal process, it can be, it took 2 years, I think, for Finland, from the time that they asked and were invited until now, almost 2 years. And so I think the failure to do this is a victory for the Kremlin, because they will have shown that we're not willing to do it because we're worried that they might escalate somehow. And instead, the best chance for Russia to actually be safe from Ukraine is for Ukraine to be in NATO. Otherwise, Ukrainians will feel the need to constantly arm themselves to the teeth and maybe even look for their own nuclear weapons to undo what they think they made, a mistake that they made years ago. Well, look, this war is what failed deterrence looks like. We did not do what we needed to do. The alliance did not look unified. Ukrainians had not done all that they should have done, even after 2014. And so you can see how the Kremlin felt pretty confident they could get away with it again. And so fortunately, everybody came together, and I'm very confident that this unity is going to continue on well into next year. But it should have never even gotten to this point.